All right, welcome back. It's the Ultimate Homeschool Community Podcast, and I'm just fixing my thing here. I'm your host, Tiffany Hernandez. We were just talking about all the things for how we don't have it all together, but we're still getting it done, and that's all that matters. Today, we have Meagan with us from Connected Kids Thrive. So welcome, Meagan. So glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Yes, you need to check out our initial interview with Meagan. She has a lot of great advice on nature schools, behavior coaching, all the things for parents and microschools and educators and everything. So go check her out. On a note for today, we're just going to kind of take this where it goes. We have seen the need to talk about insurance, and it's like the one thing that nobody wants to talk about because let's be real, it can be very slicey and dicey and it can get expensive. However, if you want to have anything to do with education in your home, in your neighborhood, anywhere in a building, you need to have some kind of insurance. So I'm going to just leave that there because we've got a few different things and places where we can take this. But Meagan, I know you brought this up for a specific reason, and that's with like moms just being able to quit their 9 to 5 and like maybe do something.
Yeah, I think most mamas want to be home with their babies,
Yeah.
and sometimes some money needs to be made too. And I definitely believe those two things can go together and with joy, with not a lot of pressure or anxiety. Um,
Yeah.
Everybody has gifts, and if we can just empower these moms to share their gifts in any way they want, other people will connect with them. It'll give them community too. And again, pressure free, joyful. And so that's what you and I are talking about today. Like, how do we help this happen? And insurance, like you said, is such a barrier.
Yeah. Well, and it really, so not only is it a barrier because of the cost, right? But I feel like it's also a barrier because there's so many different legalities of what you can do, how you can run a business or a somewhat non-business business under the radar. We're
Mhm.
not saying like do that or not, but it's definitely a possibility just to get started. However, I have talked with some of the micro schools that are very successful and they have their buildings, they're running it like a business, they're under the nonprofits, side of things. And it's funny, their motto is nobody dies. That's like their funny motto,
I
but
love
it's like
that.
so serious. But
Love
it's like,
it.
okay, that's really all this is all about is that we just want to make sure that nobody dies. Our goal is to keep everybody safe. So, I know that's a big concern when parents leave their 9 to 5 and all that it entails, and you come home and you're like, okay, I just want to be able to do this with my kids and maybe a few kids from down the road. How do we make that happen? Now you come from the behavior side, where it's like, okay, here's where we can make this work physically and allow the kids to thrive and the parents to have like the best possible way to do that, which I highly suggest going to check out your stuff. But in terms of how do we get them to see that it's even possible? That's where I'm at. Insurance piece is one, it's just one of the pieces of all the legislation that goes on, and all the regulations that are coming out for homeschoolers and micro schoolers alike.
Yeah, I used to have a little home-based preschool, and I just had, I mean, legally, you can only have, at least at the time, this was in not even in the state that I'm currently in, you could only have 6 kiddos, including your own.
That's
So I had one kiddo, and I could only have 5 others, um, and it was very, very small and intimate and so fun. We did the coolest thing because it wasn't super, super big. And, part of my programming was getting parents on board. And I do think that behavior piece, not that that's what we're talking about directly today, but when parents understand your mission, your methodology, and they are all in with you, the
yeah,
chances of anything going wrong are way reduced. So it
right.
really is making sure that they're committed and, you know, um, honestly trained a little bit too so that they understand,
Yes,
behavior also. But
right.
um yeah, again, it's a requirement even to get having a little childcare. You have to have insurance to get certified.
Right. Now, and you went the DCF route, is that correct? Like you ended up doing like the child care. How did you get registered to do the in-home preschool? Did you go through um the child and family services, or did you go through the education? What did you actually do to make that happen?
Honestly, this was like 13 years ago. I don't remember. I don't remember. Probably through, like you said, the DCF,
Yeah.
not through educational services.
Okay. Right. And because it was preschool, you're dealing with under six. And so typically what we see with microschools is that they want to be above 6 years old because you're in a different bracket of how they will regulate and create that, I would say, requirement of what you need to have. So you can go the childcare route of being underneath the DCF or as a childcare facility, and therefore you're providing educational services underneath just like childcare as in a daycare, right? And we see there's a whole ton of stuff
Mhm.
right now on Facebook where, oh, start your own preschool, make more money than daycare, have better hours, blah blah blah. There's still that insurance piece that comes to it, but you are right in that you can run a in-home thing without really doing too much for under six. Once you hit over
Mhm.
six, then there's more regulation, then there's more
Okay.
oversight, then there's more certification. However, even if you have six kids, I would still highly suggest at least getting a liability insurance or an additional policy on your homeowner's insurance to say, hey, I'm doing this thing with, these few extra kids. I don't have to, always go by what your state requires. I don't have to maybe have
Mhm.
all these extra certifications because when you do childcare, there's square footage allotments and there's age allotments of how many kids you can have based on how many ages and when you start needing to have an extra person, which I always tell everybody, two is better than one. If you need to run a kid to the bathroom and the rest of them are out there, I'm sure you experience that too. It's like, how do I manage that? Everybody's coming to the bathroom,
Yeah.
right? No. But in that sense of like, okay, if you can start this with another mom down the road, and then between the two of you, you could
Mhm.
have 12. I'm as responsible for this six, you're responsible for that six, or whatever. It makes more sense, I would say, in terms of being safe. Um, However, when you start adding more kids and you start adding more regulations, that's when it's like it gets slicey and dicey, and there's a lot of requirements. And so for families that are wanting to get started, um, I would highly suggest sticking with that under six. That's pretty much across the board in most states.
Okay.
And how long did you run for? Like in terms of your hours, what did you offer?
I think 7 to 5:30. So just the working day, but I didn't take anybody in diapers still because we did a lot of field trips. And that's the cool thing that I want to like shout from the mountaintops is, we can make our programs, whether it's a full-on childcare or anything that we want to do exactly how we want to do it.
Yeah,
Um, you know, I being in the childcare world, I had this whole idea of getting all my stars, being the highest certified in the land. And as I was going up the ladder to do that, it became much less joyful for me and the children. I had a lot more boxes I had to check. And so I went back down. I was like, nope, I'm going to do 1 star. I'm going to be the lowest rated in the land and we're going to have the most fun. And we had so much fun. And so again, we can make it look like whatever we want, but I couldn't get insurance without being licensed. So I did have to conform to some things.
right.
Now, I wonder if I had only taken 1 or 2 kids if I needed to do that, legally with getting insurance. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I
With
think,
I mean, with
go
the
ahead.
piece about with the piece about taking field trips and things, that's where my mind just starts going into having waivers and liability waivers and all the other things that go with, cars and car insurance. Because that's actually one of the big things
Yep.
that hinders a lot of micro schools from doing all that, because they are trying to do it on a little bit larger
Mhm.
scale. Even with 25 kids, you're like, okay, are the parents going to bring the kids to the field trip and I'm just facilitating the field trip, or how is this working? With the since you had to get certified or you had to get some kind of formality to be even allowed to get insurance, which that is, yes, we need to have some kind of DBA, even if you're not doing like an LLC. I usually don't, I tell everybody don't do an LLC unless if you're making over 5K or more a month, just because the taxes and everything else with that. So do you know what did you do for your business? Did you do an LLC or were you doing a DBA?
Yeah, I did an LLC.
Okay. All right. So, and
I
there's
also
other
wasn't
options for
savvy.
that. Right. Well, and that's the thing.
Okay,
Go ahead. I think there's some lag.
oh, sorry. I think there is some like I wasn't savvy in all the financial stuff. I did not make very much money at all. I got to keep my baby home. That was the number one thing that mattered to me. But I also purchased all the food and it was all organic and we made food every day. So my profit margins were very, very pathetically tiny. But again, that wasn't my goal. I just wanted my baby home with me
Right.
and having a really grand time. So I'm glad that there's people like you that are saying, hey, there's all these different options of how to run a business because I did not know those.
Yes. Well, I didn't know them either until I got into this space. And I'm like, oh, what do we need to
Yeah.
have? How do we need to do this? How can we do this without maybe doing this? How can how can
Mm-hmm.
we how can we cross the, T's and dot the I's and still maybe not? Read
Yeah.
between the lines, folks. So I run a nonprofit. I have a 501(c)(3). I don't suggest that for people just starting out if they're going to do something small like what you're suggesting with 6 people. I will say there is some other options like a PMA, which is a private membership association. Now you are responsible for the finances and it does come after you personally. However, you're in the private sector, so there's a lot of leeway in what you can do with that. There are several that are running little small programs like what you're talking about using a PMA. I would still suggest going to somebody who does that and has more knowledge in that and is a professional in that before you go down that route and be like, oh, well, she said that, so that's a great idea. No. But it does give you more leeway and there is less regulations. I believe you can still get insurance with that. So the insurance piece
Hmm.
is really to
What
save you and your bum and everybody else within your household. And that's like probably why you got an LLC, because that's another barrier of what people can come after
mhm.
versus coming after you. There is a ton
Yeah.
of information you can find online with the DBA versus LLC versus PMA versus 501(c)(3. And some of it can be really misleading because a lot of it isn't geared towards education and running an educational business. Um, there are, so I looked up for one of my clients who was out in California the difference between running as a childcare facility with the DCF uh, versus like a private school or some other kind of educational service. You can also get around this by being an educational service, so like a tutor or whatnot. However, because of all the micro schools that are coming out, the government they've got their eye on the industry, and it only takes one micro school to do it wrong or to get caught and it ruins it for everybody in terms of how you're running your business. So I don't want to say that to scare people away from this because we desperately need it. And with everything coming out in society, we need small groups, we need children to be safe, and parents need alternate options that don't leave them stranded feeling like, well, this is the only option I have is X, I only can public schools, like no, or I only can put them in private school, no. um but the stipulations, I will say, like for specific states like California, was strenuous, and there were
Yeah.
lots of legalities that had to be met, tons of checklists, things that you had to fulfill to even be considered. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Like in terms of being a tutor
You know,
instead.
yeah, I was listening. I don't want to lead anyone astray here. And of course, everyone do your own research from anything that we're saying here. We're
Yes.
just trying to get this conversation started and yeah, and give support where we can. But I was listening to an interview with an insurance agent, and he blatantly recommended don't use the word school in your programming if you can get away from that. Use club,
Yes.
use something different because yeah, school has this connotation of what that should look like, and of a lot of us actually are trying to get away from what that looks like. And
Yes.
so, how can we get away from that word? That can be helpful. Is that what have you heard around that?
Oh, 100%. Yes. In our micro school groups, everybody is told if you can be a learning center, if you can be a tutoring service, if you can be an educational or like extension of something service without the word school in it, or educational club, something along those lines. Uh, which is also where the regulatory issues are coming in as to how you are listed as a business. Um,
Mm,
and there's pros and cons to this because on one side, it's like, yes, we don't want to say school because all the different requirements that we have to have. However, on the other side, it's like, okay, these requirements were set up to keep children and just people safe. Coming from like the health and public safety side, especially for building interiors, fire safety codes, ADA codes, all of that. These regulations were put into place to keep people safe within buildings. If you are not enforcing those because you're saying, oh, well, I'm something different, um, that you can put yourself in harm's way. However, some of them are very specific, like for schools, you need to have overhead. I only know this because my husband's a firefighter. And so he talks to me about this stuff all the time. I'm like, great, I don't care, but I do care because it matters for us. Um, I had a client that was out in Texas. The reason why I'm bringing this up, client out in Texas, they just wanted to open up a autism clinic, not like a clinic, but it was to help them with their life skills, teaching them laundry, teaching them how to cook, teaching them, how to use the bathroom properly, that kind of stuff, like very much life skills, but it was going to be a school. And they wanted to buy a residential building. That's a big no-no if you're going to be a commercial business
mm,
because they don't have all the ADA, they don't have all the overhead sprinkler systems that you have to have for so many occupants and blah, 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 blah. And so, and those things can add up in terms of cost. So this is where it's like, okay, how do I do the thing without fully being the school, but still being able to get
mm.
insurance to cover me and the kids because I still need to operate somehow safely. It's been confusing.
Yeah, yikes. And it's so hard because people go in with the best intentions, this big dream of making this beautiful programming accessible to everybody, and then as they dig in, it's just like, oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
then so many do just stop. And so that's kind of what we're here to do too, is to see where we can help and see what barriers we can eliminate. And yeah,
Yeah, between our two brains of
some
you coming from how to run the program and then how I come in is like, okay, let's be strategic about what are we actually calling this? Why are we calling it this? How does your state actually want you to operate safely? But ideally, if let's say the mom is deciding, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm planning. And this is the other thing I tell people too, do not go, like you weren't making a whole bunch of money. You were probably just breaking even just so that your kiddo and you could stay home, right? So if
yeah.
this is like, if you are needing this to be your bread and butter, I do not suggest going into this field of work. And I hate saying that to people, but that is the honest truth. And that's for any business, right? Your business is your baby and you are having to support it bathe it, clothe it, feed it, put all this energy into it to make it work.
Further.
So yeah. So like have something else on the side. A lot of people do this because they feel called to do it because they really want to stay home with your kids like you did. However, that doesn't mean then that you're expecting it to make you all this big buku dollars and like you can retire. Um, however, it does need to at least cover its cost and potentially be able to not necessarily grow, but grow in terms of what you can offer to your community. Maybe you can add more events or things like that, but that does cost. So this is my one note of like, you are worthy to get paid. Childcare costs. So you have costs. So don't underestimate what you need to charge. Know your numbers, know what you're doing this for, and you just have to tell everybody, like, listen, I'm providing you with this service. Yes, we're like a boutique club learning experience, whatever you want to say. But there's still, I still, I still need to like cover the extra light and the extra toilet paper and the extra paper towels or whatever. Um, I'm
Yeah.
sure you experienced that too, needing to make sure those extra costs are covered.
Yeah, I think some programs figure it out and they have families that are willing to pay top dollar, for a very, very small program. And that's great. A lot of providers have a hard time charging a premium of what they're worth. And so
Yeah,
that can be really, really tricky because costs are so high, yeah, toilet paper is really, really expensive. And a lot of depending on what the environment is around your neighborhood or whatever, it can be hard to charge, quote unquote, like
what
you
you're
said, what you're worth. But
100%.
some
So
are really, really successful. So,
yes,
I mean,
it
definitely
did.
try and see what's available.
Yeah, and I would say too, it depends on area. So, I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
very low income area and we do not make a majority of our costs covered by our tuition or like our fees for students to join.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the 501c3 really comes into help because we can go after grants to help cover the other costs. There's grants like the Dollar
Mm-hmm.
General grant, which is closing in a few days. So I don't know if this will be too late, but it is an option to have literacy and to get literacy covered. And there's a $3,000 summer reading program. There's also a $10,000 family program that helps with adult literacy, parent-child connection, and then child um, literacy assistance. And so there's things like that that you can go out and find. But are you guaranteed that money? Absolutely not. And this is where it comes
Yep.
in. How do we diversify our portfolio of what we offer? And this is where I actually wanted to like sidestep this into saying if you run a summer camp, you are not under the same jurisdiction as if you run a year-long program. And that can really help
Yep.
a lot of families. So even though you might be a 9 to 5
Mm-hmm.
program, which is actually more than the 4 hours that's generally allotted to having an in-home childcare service, you can then run for weeks at a time in the summer and make up the extra costs that you need to continue to run the rest of the year. So I don't know if you've heard of that or if
Yep.
you've done that
There's
yourself.
so many ways. I never did run summer camps. I ran all summer long because families had to work also. So it was just a
Exactly.
year-round program. Um, but you know, I kind of just what I'm being called to sidestep for a second is below age 5, in my opinion, humbly, that I'll scream from the mountaintops, we don't need to be pushing academics.
Yeah,
So
totally.
we can sprinkle it on top, and if your gift is literacy, you could totally have a 3-year-old literacy program. Like whatever you want to do is great. I just think, if there's mamas with little ones, I just don't want them to feel pressure to have this school type environment. Kiddos don't need it. They need a mud kitchen. They need access to outside and free play and art and all these amazing, beautiful opportunities. That's what they really, really need. And that's what they need
Hmm.
more of. And so we don't have to focus in on those academics at all. We can lightly sprinkle them on top and kids will eat it up.
Of course. Well, and play is way more important than we actually give it
Yeah.
credit. And yet there's so many studies on the importance of play and how much quicker children learn from play versus
Yeah.
doing a repetition outside of that. And yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely don't advocate for school before 5 or 6, boys before 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally. Uh-huh.
because yes, so I am on board with that. Now, what I will say is practical life skills can be done, which is a big Montessori thing. And I know you know some about that, but it doesn't have to be so formal. I feel like there's like these troops
Right.
of you've got the whimsical with Charlotte Mason side,
Or
and then you've got the Montessori, right? You've got all these different Waldorf sides, and everybody takes this standpoint of like, no, this is the best way to do it. And we don't run our home like that. My children went to Montessori, but when I tried to bring it home, it's like this way too formal. We just need to focus on the basics. And I think that's what you're trying to say too.
yeah.
Is like this is learning. They are learning regardless, and so we don't need to really focus so much. The only reason why I bring up the literacy grants is because it covers everything. So it can be helping families to even teach pre-reading skills, pre-writing skills. That counts. So just trying to think of like outside the
That can be
box
done inside
ways.
kitchen.
Yes,
Totally.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Or even like
Okay.
squirting, frosting
Ah,
onto a
yeah.
cookie. And so
Love it.
we can definitely make it what we need it to be. It's just a matter
Mm-hmm.
of, I would say, what the parent wants, which is where you come in
Yeah.
and you're like, here's how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here's what we're willing to do and we're not willing to do, and making sure there's real, very a lot of clarity around that. I was known, like my kids never, we didn't even have paper hardly. I mean, we were known as like the not academic preschool, but we cooked every day. We talked about letters all the time. Yeah, it was very, very fun.
So
Um,
if a parent
something,
is real quick, if a parent is wanting to do like
yeah,
a preschool program like you're mentioning, where they're literally just there's not a curriculum per se, you maybe have an outline or a rhythm. Is there somewhere where you have that where they can find how they could maybe copy or use some notes that you do you have any notes or anything like that that you can share?
I don't actually. I mean, I'm happy to possibly come up with something. I just encourage people to stand in their power. And, if you have a website, great. You don't need one. A Facebook page is free advertising. You don't have to
Oh
do,
yeah.
anything formal. And just stand in your power and provide, if that's your belief, that kids, if you stand firm in that, I mean, you've got a lot of reasons that you can share and you'll find your people. And then invite that conversation. Like if you want to know more, if you're, have questions, connect with me. I just explained that in my in-home interviews. I was a nature-based preschool in a very small town, and people would come to me, and then I would explain my philosophy, and a lot of them left, which is good, right? You don't want everybody. You want to attract and, repel the right people. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a, can we jump back on insurance again for a second? Or did you have
Yes.
other things to talk about in this?
No, you're good.
I am one, and this is kind of off the cuff, and these are Tiffany and I we have questions too that we kind of want to throw out there for people, because I sure as heck don't know about this insurance stuff very well. I am wondering about, because I'm a foster mom, right? And we are just about to take another little guy full time, and we are going to be getting an umbrella insurance policy that'll just kind of protect to some degree before, our actual insurance has to kick in. And
Hmm.
that's my wonder also, is that something, because I don't know how much that'll
Yes.
be, but I can't imagine it'll be a lot.
Hmm.
And it'll still serve as some protection. And I've wondered that, what if families took out an umbrella policy on their own kiddo, if their own kiddo was to get hurt in a program, that they could use that. I don't know. Is that an option? Um,
Yeah.
Because I think
So,
if I had a school, I would be very tempted to encourage or demand that families take out their own insurance policy, because my kiddo actually just got hurt at school. And as a parent, I fully believe that is my responsibility. It is not the school's responsibility to cover
right.
that. And it's been about $8,000 so far. It's been a very expensive injury that I probably could have forced the school to pay for if I was that kind of person, right? And so it is something to think about. And yeah, it's definitely brought it home for me for sure on what I want parents to what part they need to carry too.
Right. Okay. So yes, on the umbrella policies, I have seen that in the microschool groups, people asking about umbrella policies for their homes as well. And so I think that that would you're definitely going to have to reach out to your agents to talk about that, but I don't see why it couldn't work. Now, the other option, and this is what I think I had mentioned to you before, in our state, we have a homeschool association. Through that homeschool association, students that are listed or as members automatically get insurance through the
Oh,
association.
wow.
So if that student ends up joining a co-op, several of the co-ops in our area actually have them pay, I think it's an extra like $2 to $5 or something for facility insurance, which means that the co-op then states to the association that they have this group that's meeting. Here's the students that are listed, and they pay that fee, which is very, very small compared to what you would do on your own individually under an umbrella policy. Now, if that is available in all states, I really cannot tell you. I am planning to have a meeting with the insurance I think she's like a director or something in the association, hopefully soon, and I can maybe get some updates so we can have another conversation around this. Because if that can cover co-ops, can it also cover what we're talking about, which would still be considered a co-op of sorts? Does it cover drop-off
Mhm.
programs? I don't know. I'd have to talk with her about that. Most of the co-ops here in this state are not drop-off program. They are with the parent on site. And so I don't know if it covers off site, or any type of like field trips or that kind of thing. I do know, with what you're doing, I would say liability waivers for all the students involved. And then you have, extra auto insurance and stuff
Mhm.
that you'd have to research on. But in terms of umbrella policies per student, that might work as an option and then put it back on the parents, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, I think um yeah, that never mind. I was gonna take us down a whole other rabbit hole. Yeah. I think parents are when parents are held or invited to be held accountable, they will. They do. And so I think as much as a parent, yeah, we can empower parents to take, to do this, that they will.
Of course. Well, and if they're more involved anyways, they're going to care more. I mean, that's why they're coming out of the public
Yeah.
school setting. That's why they're putting their child in a smaller group
Yes.
environment that's better set for them. So, some of the options here that I've got is talking about a home business endorsement plus a general liability. This is just for like an informal few kids. So that's something to look up is a home business endorsement plus the general liability. If you do have a formal daycare, there's in-home daycare insurance, which is liability plus an E&O. I don't know what I'm guessing that's equipment and operations. I'm not sure. I don't know insurance lingo. If you're trying to really grow a business and have other hirees and everything, it says BOP, which I'm guessing has to do with like general liability plus professional liability, which that's something else that I want to mention is professional liability and then workman's comp if you hire anybody, and then additional commercial auto coverage for transportation, like what you're talking about. Um, If you are a professional and let's say you are an educator or some sort, and you are licensed or whatever in your state, I would absolutely get the professional liability because that protects you personally on top of. This is a very Sue happy United
Mhm.
States of America, and we can't protect ourselves enough. You do start adding up the dollars when you add the workman's comp and the professional liability. I will say I enjoy what I personally have. It's now called Ergo Plus Next or Ergo Next insurance, and I'm not telling anybody like I don't get anything from that. I can put the link below, but we don't really get much from it. They have a very decent cost. I want to say ours is like 20 something and some change, 2027 something around there for general liability, which is very, very affordable per month. Um, Once I did
Mhm.
start clicking on other options, there were a lot of like workman's comp was another $70 a month per person. So I'm like, it can start adding up. But if you're just getting started, I
Mhm.
think that general liability work will cover you for the most part. It's just a matter of can you get something like the homeowner, the homeowners umbrella, or can you get something like the homeschool association where you're actually under their membership. All your students have to be under their membership, and then they deal with the insurance, and you don't have to as much,
Mm.
which is a really great option.
And I wonder with the Homeschool Association if they would be open to covering little tinier, smaller programs that aren't necessarily right academic
Mhm.
focused. Do you know?
So I could ask. I think the co-ops really are, they vary through the state. They are not all academic focused. Several of them are
Okay.
like, I think some of them are like theater or music. Some of them are hiking
Okay.
groups. Some of them are like what you have nature programs, like what we have is our nature program. And so there's a lot of different things that I think are covered, but it would be a conversation. I'd have to ask that question when I talk with her about what is covered. And our children under 6 covered? Because generally you don't register as a homeschooler in this state until you're 6. So can
Mm.
you register with the association at 5 and below? I don't know. If you have a sibling, does
Okay.
that
That's a good
count?
question to ask.
I don't know. Um,
Okay.
that that would that's where you start getting slicing dicey. And what I just saw Heidi St. I think it's St. John talk about in Washington, they're trying to make it so that you have to put your plan for homeschooling 2 years in advance
Oh
of
my
what you're
God.
going to be doing. It's insane. So, our rights are being taken away as fast as they possibly can. So we really, and this is another piece of it where we really have to be on top of it, and it can
Mm.
change so quickly. Um, and that can be daunting of a task.
That's why it's really nice to connect with, a mama down the street or, your homeschool association too, and kind of get someone that's been doing, kind of doing the same thing as you. Being lonely, I think, is the most daunting piece. But then, yeah, trying to figure it all out can be very, very daunting.
Yes. Without our homeschool co-ops, I don't think we would have continued homeschooling because it was very
Mhm.
isolating. And we were homeschooling during COVID when it was, nobody, no contact, no all these things. Granted, we were in a small town where we could get out and see the town and be around people, and nobody was wearing masks and all of that. But if we didn't find the group, it would have been very challenging to stay the course, because it can get overwhelming and it can feel like it's an impossible thing, even though you want so much to do this thing. And a lot of times your kids are getting a lot more out of being in that small group than being by themselves. Kids learn from kids.
Yes, they do. Absolutely. And I had the same experience. We we moved. I did not plan on homeschooling. I did not know
Right.
much about that. And because of the town, we ended up homeschooling, and it was an immediate, beautiful family of like 70 people that just loved on us. And we're not homeschooling now, but we will be again soon. And so yeah, very, very cool. And I will be looking definitely into all this insurance stuff. Is there anything else you
Yes.
wanted to chat about?
I would just say double check with state
Yeah.
requirements for what we're talking
Mhm.
about because it can get a little confusing. You don't go to the Board of Education to look up childcare laws for, DCF is a they're different entities. And so you want to make sure you're going and researching all the different routes. Um, because that can also get confusing. Like, well, where do I go to find the information? Obviously, you can just Google, what do I do for an in-home daycare? And you're going to get
Mhm.
information. But go to your actual state buildings, ask for somebody if you can get an actual person and hear what you need. Sometimes they don't always know what they're talking about, so that's been super fun. Or they'll give you one story and then somebody else gives you another story.
Uh-huh.
We
Yep.
had a situation here up north of me. She runs a microschool and it's in an area where there wasn't any regulations about it. So she was a non-public school entity that was exempt. I'm like, okay, so you're an exempt non-public school entity. What does that even mean? And all she had to turn into, once they finally got to that, for her to be under that jurisdiction, then they were
Title or
basically
yeah, okay.
saying, yeah, basically they were saying like, okay, we just need your attendance for the year or whatever. Like when are the kids actually coming? We always talk about government insight on things, but we wanna play nice in the sandbox. So that's always what I suggest is like go in there. Don't act like you don't know what you're talking about. Do some research before you go in because they will try to steer you towards what answer they want to give you versus what you want to have. So know what you want to do before you go in there,
Mhm.
like what you did. Okay, I have 6 kids. I'm running this in-home preschool, and this is how I'm doing it, and this is when we're meeting, and I just need something. I need to be under whatever regulations so I can do this. What do I need to do? And a lot of times they'll be more helpful when you're specific instead of I'm kind of looking at this, or maybe I'm thinking about doing that. Don't be specific, I guess, is like my
Yeah.
biggest thing. Be specific on what you need, be specific on how you're wanting to run. And that goes for your families too, so you can find the right people, like you said.
Yeah. And for those who don't want to run a full-on childcare or preschool, and there's really no difference. It just depends on what you want to label it. Um, there are a lot of ways, and I don't know the other ways. I don't know all the logistics of how they work, but if you don't have them all day, or if parents say, like, there's so many different ways that you can still have kiddos, give your kiddos to play with, meet other moms, make a little bit of money. That is possible. And so I think that's our ultimate goal here is connecting, we're saying moms, but parents together. And insurance is just, it can be a barrier, but it doesn't have to be a barrier.
Right.
And yeah, find your
It's
people and give kiddos experiences. That's what this is all about.
absolutely, it's definitely less scary when
Mhm.
you start doing a little bit of research and then finding out, okay, it's really not that many requirements. It's really maybe not that much that I need to do to get started. Maybe as I go along, I can learn a little bit along the way. But that is why we have our nature co-op. I say it's a micro school because we're doing learning, but we don't do learning in the way that most people think a co-op would be doing learning. Because like we're learning through experience, we're learning through projects, we're learning through social emotional skills and all these other things. And that has been the best place where people have been able to find their people and being specific on what we
Mhm.
offer and what we don't offer. And don't get me wrong, we have changed how we offer things, what specifically we offer. We've done beta testing on all these other things. And we've had different groups each time, and we've learned a lot of things. It's not going to be perfect the first time you come into it, but as long as you know your why and you're dedicated to having the best possible outcome for your kids, it might change what it looks like every year. That's okay too.
Yeah. I think what I would love to add here is to circle around to the yes, play nice in the sandbox. I love that little analogy. And know your, know what you're going for, and don't be afraid to push back a little too.
Oh,
When the
yes.
state regs would come into my preschool and say, you can't do this and you have to do this, I would say, nope. Here's where my parents are signing that we're not doing that. And here's where we're signing where we are doing that. And so if it's a ridiculous thing, like don't lay down for the continual overreach, but
100%.
respectfully, kindly, firmly, stay nice, and be firm about what you believe in and what these kids need and what these families need, because the state don't know that a lot of the time.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. A lot of times, well, even now with the bigger programs, they're getting told how they can operate and why they need to operate this way. And it's like, no, we exited the system because that was the whole
Oh,
point. We're doing it how we need to do it
fix your
for our
yeah,
specific
fix your own
demographic.
grass before you come and fix mine. Thank you very much. Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
definitely.
Have your boundaries. And this is where having some legal knowledge or having somebody who has legal knowledge, um, what the lady that I spoke with that runs like a multi-million-dollar microschool, she's in a very affluent area in Florida. I have to preface that because a lot of people are like, what do you mean? Um, that she's making multi-millions. No, she's in an area, okay? But what she was saying was if you're going to do anything, don't just do it willy-nilly. Uh, commit to doing it right because it will save you in the long run. Make sure you have a good bookkeeper and a good accountant and a really good lawyer if you can, even afford a few. And this is where HSLDA can come into play. They do have a group or a co-op division where they will help with some legalities on what you can and
Okay.
can't do and how to manage or maneuver within state requirements. Now it does cost to be a part of HSLDA. They also have legal, I believe some kind of insurance of some sort, but they can cover you to an extent, with whatever membership you get that helps you in a court of law a situation if that does come down to that. Not that we want to, but we need to be thinking ahead and preparing just in case. That's always just be prepared.
Yeah. Mm. Yep. Be prepared. Very cool. All right. Anything else?
I think that's it. It's been a pleasure chatting. We're gonna definitely have to recircle this, and I would say if we could focus next time too more on how do we actually run these programs and what makes the most sense for age groups and that kind of thing. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, definitely. You're such a joy to talk with. And I will definitely, um, where are you going to put this recording so that people can find it and look at all these
Yes.
acronyms and kind of start digging
Yes.
into
So
that
this will
journey?
be
Because it's
on
a
our
journey and an
podcast. And if you, we will also, if you want to find Meagan and learn more about what she has to offer, there will be links in the show notes as well. So it'll be on our YouTube channel, which is where you'll be able to find this, and then also on our podcast channel as well. So once we get all of this solidified in terms, and I will put some notes as well from just a few things that I've found. Obviously, like we said, do your own research. Don't just go based off of what we said. But I think this should be a great starting point for anybody that's looking to get started.
Yeah, and I'll definitely post this link where I can too for people in my world so they can find you and find this stuff, because we're dedicated to making environments for kiddos that are really fun and for parents too. So,
Absolutely.
all
Thanks so
right.
much for chatting,
Very,
Meagan.
very
It's been such
cool.
a pleasure. Yes. Happy homeschooling, everyone.
Yeah.